decide. Don't look. Okay. We're going to practice a little bit trying to decide which court would be responsible for which case. So once you get your question wrapped up, if you want to look back at your diagram, we're going to do 4 examples. I want you to look at your diagram and try to figure out which court would have jurisdiction, like where would this case be based on the situation. Thank you, sir. So it says, employees of Chester Carpet Company sued their employer for failing to make pension contributions as required by the Federal Employee Retirement Income Security Act. So look at your graphic and try to think, like, okay, which side, first of all, is this going to be the national government or the state government? And then try to figure out, like, where in the process are we? Is this an original, like, trial court? Is this a first appeal? Is this in a second appeal, etc.? Okay, so I'll give you guys, like, 20 seconds, and then I'm going to put the answer up.
Federal government, and somewhat not U.S. Supreme Court. You think it's just U.S. Just because, like, it's like an actual company, you know what I mean? Well, the thing is, though, if it's the circuit court, like, what is it that does, like,
All right, drum roll. The answer is U.S. District Court. Is that what you said? Okay. It's federal law, so it's going to have to end up there. And we don't have a decision already, so this has to be the first time. So U.S. District Court is the only court where you have a jury. It's the only court where you're going to have an original decision, except for, like I said, that like minor little part with the Supreme Court. So if it's the first time a case is heard and it's federal, it's got to be there. Okay? Let's try another one. Bob was arrested for aggravated robbery. He was tried and convicted in a state district court, but he appealed his case based upon a question of the validity of the eyewitness accounts. All right, you'll talk through it.
Oh, wait, or would it be state court of criminal appeals? Would it say criminal? I can't remember my handwriting.
Did we write criminal?
No.
Yes, it's Texas Court of Criminal Appeals.
Okay, so I hear some good discussion. Is this going to be the State Court of Appeals or the State Court of Criminal Appeals?
I think criminal. He was already arrested for aggravated robbery.
Just kidding. Okay. Here's why it's State Court of Appeals. Well, who put that? Okay, so why is that?
Because he's appealing against them, so it's Bob versus whoever.
What would make it be at the State Court of Criminal Appeals?
If they were appealing.
Well, it wouldn't have to. I'm glad that you said that. So that was based on my example.
Okay.
It would have to have been a second appeal.
Okay, yeah.
So it would have to have been this. So it's like levels, right? So you have at that bottom level, you have the first one. If you're appealing, it's right above you. If anyone is appealing again, it goes up to the next one. So this would have to be if we were in our second round of appeals. And the same person can appeal over and over and over. Okay? All right. Here we go. Thomas was convicted in federal district court for kidnapping a 23-year-old woman. He decided to appeal the court ruling.
U.S. Circuit Court?
We don't need 20 seconds anymore because we got it. U.S. Circuit Courts. Right?
What exactly is like all in the circuit?
Say it again, sweetie.
What exactly is all in the circuit court?
It's just that's going to be federal. So it's going to be just like the State Court of Appeals. It's just that it's a federal crime. And a big deal is just like, I'm going to be honest with you guys, 95% of criminal activity is state criminal activity. Like one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is that federal crimes are worse than state crimes. If you steal my mail and are convicted, that's a federal crime. Okay? If you, I don't want to say it like I'm being, but if you do something really like if you like there was kind of like a mass murder like in Frisco, that's a crime against the state of Frisco or the state of Texas. So the gravity is not where it goes. It's just who had a right to define it. So kidnapping is a federal crime because you're taking people across, like it's been defined as a federal crime, and a lot of times it might involve crossing state borders. Bank robbery is a federal crime because you're stealing United States government currency. But murder is a state crime.
I have a question.
Rape is a state crime. So the only reason it can be federal is if the federal government has like authority over that. And remember, the federal government's pretty narrowly defined in terms of like the crimes would have to be directly related to the things they have power over. Yes, ma'am.
So if someone were to like kidnap another person, but they only stayed in that state, is that still federal?
Kidnapping is still federal, and does anybody know the root? I'm not 100% sure why.
That is weird.
I know. I know that there's gotta be a good reason for it, but I don't know.
It's probably just because you don't know if they've been across the country.
Yeah, I feel
Or
like that
not.
would be a thing, like, if, like, someone
I don't-
kidnapped you and, like,
Because you just don't know
took
where they
you.
are. Like,
Potentially. I mean, there's gotta be some kind of reasoning for it, I just don't know. Okay? Does that help? So it's not gravity, it's just who would have defined it. And if I ever asked you to figure these out, you guys, I would give you little hints, like things it powers or things that you should know. Alright, one more. Governor of Tennessee is upset that Georgia won't return land that was given incorrectly when incorporated as a state in 1796. So Tennessee decides they're gonna sue Georgia. Everybody, right? Supreme Court. Do you know that's real? That when they did, like when they made Georgia, that when they made Georgia a state and the land surveyor came out and they were drawing the borders, I watched some like thing on Netflix about this. Anyway, so it was like how the states get their shapes, and the surveyor messed up with the line, and so technically there is this portion of land that was supposed to be Tennessee that got drawn into Georgia, and they like won't give it back. So interesting. See, you learn from TV all the time. Okay, are we good? Okay, so let's move on then. Now that we've kind of got like this organizational structure, I'm really just going to talk about the Supreme Court from here on out. Not because the Supreme Court is what you and I interact with, but because they're the final word on the Constitution, we need to really understand their decision making. I cannot stress enough to you the importance of understanding your Supreme Court, because think about it. Somebody gets appointed to the court for life. I mean, that legacy is huge. Because the longest serving person on the Supreme Court, they were there for 34 years.
So, more than Muhammad.
34 years that person is telling us what the Constitution means. And think about the court cases that we've already talked about where the decision is like 5-4, 6-3. One person can make a significant difference on our civil liberties, our civil rights, checks and balances. I mean, their decisions are massive. So we need to really kind of understand their decisions. Okay? All right, this graphic right here, this shows you something called the circuits, right? So the circuit courts are, if you look back at your graphic, that's the second level of the court. So this is our appellate court. We happen to live in the Fifth Circuit. So if we go back to the Gina situation, because I can't let that go. So when Gina was charged, let's say that she does get charged for kidnapping. When we appeal, that appeal is only going to happen here in the Fifth Circuit. So our Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is going to be down here. She's going to appeal, that's where the case is going to be heard, and whatever decision is made in the Fifth Circuit establishes a precedent for all of the lower courts within the Fifth Circuit, all of those federal courts. What does precedent mean? Do y'all know? What do you think, Jacob?
Isn't it like, you're setting the standards for afterwards?
That's a great way to say that, setting the standard. A precedent is a guideline or a message to the lower courts. The decision is where we get that. So you guys have learned precedents like all along. When you learn the phrase separate but equal, when you learn the phrase where it says you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, like those little sayings, like they probably, like you might remember them. Those are what the precedents are. So the court writes a decision, and then we figure out, okay, what can we pull out of that to explain to the lower courts what the Constitution actually means. So precedents, that's like judicial review. That is basically establishing for the lower courts, well, no, this is what this means. This is what you're supposed to do, okay? Each of these circuits is overseen by one or more of the 9 justices. Wait, I said that the wrong way. One or more circuits is overseen by one of the 9 justices. So since there's more than 9, some of them oversee more than one, and I don't know the breakdown. So what that means is that, like, if, for example, if Justice Thomas was over the Fifth Circuit, that means he's just kind of paying attention to what's going on. Because they want to be anticipating what kind of cases are coming to them. Especially if in the Fifth Circuit and the Eighth Circuit, we're doing things that are very different. Yes, ma'am.
So the VR, are those the Virgin Islands?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if they were like to commit a crime there, would it be under like the Virgin Islands court? They go to like Florida or
Are
something.
they, I feel ignorant right now. Is that a territory? Is it an American territory?
Well, they have the
US
BVI
Virgin,
and
yeah.
USVI. So like
Yeah, so I mean, if it's a territory, it would fall under federal, like whatever our federal system of law is.
So do they have to get the federal and the
Oh, like in the video that we watched?
Yeah, would they have to get like federal and
I don't know what their local court system
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cause like I
That's
go
a good
to the
question.
Virgin Islands and it's like you wouldn't think that they would have like the same way just 'cause like it's not like Americanized that much.
Are you gonna go break some laws? Is that what you're trying to figure out?
Pretty much. But they have like their drinking age there is 18, like it's just like different laws, but
Well,
part of
but
the
it can't, I mean, the drinking age in Texas could be 18 as well. We just choose not to. I would think that there couldn't be a direct violation of federal law,
Yeah.
but they would still be able to have their own system of, as long as it didn't conflict. I am purely speculating.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That's
I was just
a good
curious.
question. Okay. Okay, so let's go. Let's think about this. So, if the circuit court established that Gina did have let's use that same situation. Let's say that she also got a really bad attorney when she was being charged for kidnapping Jacob. So, if they agreed and they said you have to get a good attorney, what if over in the Ninth Circuit they weren't doing that? What if in the Ninth Circuit they had a similar case and they said, no way, we're not going to provide you a good attorney? Is that a problem?
They'd be violating.
Yeah.
Why is it a problem?
Cause I mean, like, if they gave her a bad one in the beginning, then like, I think you can't really choose if like they give you a good or bad one.
But does it seem like rights should be viewed differently in the Ninth Circuit versus the Fifth Circuit? Does that trouble you?
Mhm.
It does? Why, Brian?
Because of the fact that, like when you're in the country, everything is supposed to be kind of like together, and it's like if you have different rulings on like the law, then people might, I don't know, be like incentivized to commit crimes in more like lenient areas.
Potentially. I mean, I think that that's probably true. I guess what I'm going to tell you, we call that a circuit conflict. When one circuit is making a decision and then the other circuit's making a different decision. Some circuit conflicts the court doesn't care about. They're like, that's tolerable. We are a federal country, we have regional differences. What is acceptable in terms of First Amendment, obscenity, limitation kind of stuff in Las Vegas is very different than what's in Frisco, right? We're different communities, we're different cultures. So what you might be able to censor and restrict in Frisco, you probably can't censor and restrict in Las Vegas. So the First Amendment's being applied differently, but the court would probably go, that's okay. But something like voting rights or, search and seizure, things that are seen as like super fundamental, the court's like, ooh, that's not okay. So there are circuit conflicts that exist in our country that the court doesn't mess with. But if there's a circuit conflict that they're like, this is a real problem, or there's just like a lot of tension, then the court might say, I think that's something we need to address. So that might be one thing that would cause them to do that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. How did we say this word? Okay, here's what you're just gonna say cert. You're just gonna say writ of cert, okay? You can say it, it's like a tomato word. You can say certiorari or certiorari. I've heard it both ways. I just am gonna say cert though from here on out, okay? So the certiorari process, what that means is the court, it's the application process to the Supreme Court. So I told you that the court doesn't hear a lot of cases, so we're going to try to understand, and I'm going to give you guys some examples where you're going to try to figure out if the court was actually going to hear those cases. Right. So don't write all this down. I just think this is interesting, and it'll kind of give you a frame of reference. So every year you have thousands of people who are asking the Supreme Court to hear their case. There are two ways you can file with the court. You can pay the money that's required. You have an attorney that's written up your application, that's gone through all the legal process to represent you. You can also be a person that is classified as informa pauperis, an IFP petition. It means you are so poor you cannot afford the filing fee. You cannot afford an attorney. You are probably sitting in jail and you are writing this out like on notebook paper. The court accepts both of those. The vast majority come from people in prison or people that are, sitting that can't afford it. That is a small percentage of the cases the court actually hears today, okay? Who's paying